products of the DOP system during the apartheid era was, instead of paying farm workers, people were given alcohol. And pregnant women were consuming this alcohol, and as they were carrying their pregnancy, the alcohol would go across the placental background and affect the fetus. And that led to severe, severe impacts on fetal alcohol syndrome, particularly with microencephaly, like the smallness of the head, and issues related to mental learning abilities, etc. You may also come with congenital abnormalities of brain, things that happen in situ during the development process. Infections such as meningitis, measles, or whooping cough can also contribute. Exposure to toxins such as mercury or lead. We often talk about fish with mercury poisoning and all these other things that we are subjected to from the macro environment. Maternal disease such as rubella, the use of drugs, infection during pregnancy, problems at birth such as insufficient oxygenation. So we know some of the common genetic abnormalities such as Down syndrome and Fragile X. And then the Down syndrome is a result of an abnormal number of chromosomes, particularly trisomy or 3 copies of chromosome 21. Fragile X syndrome, because it's on the X chromosome, has a severe effect on males. And so there are many, many problems that are on the X chromosome, but given the fact that males only have 1 copy of the X, it is much, much more impactful and deleterious on their well-being. Now, the types of genetic abnormalities is multifaceted. You could have chromosomal changes, like in numbers, as I just told you, with the Down syndrome. There are other things like Klinefelter syndrome with an extra X chromosome in males. You could have deletions of certain parts of chromosome, like Angelman syndrome. You could have single point mutations. There's just one base pair on your genome that can cause such a disease. Issues related to metabolism, and then some that are not in the DNA or chromosomes, but what we call epigenetic, other confounding factors that are within that macro environment of the genome that can affect things. So it is very important that we understand the genetic etiology of these things. How do we diagnose it? This diagnosis can be at the phenotype in terms of what you see. Family histories need to be recorded, physical examinations, assessment of maybe the dysmorphology or any physical disabilities, brain scanning, looking at processes that happen in the brain. And then there's also dependent on the diagnostic expertise of the clinician that's looking at a particular problem. And then, of course, to be able to diagnose at a molecular level, these days we have gone to the level of where we can sequence an entire genome. But how do you take information from the molecular level, identify the causal agent, and associate it with the clinical manifestation of the disease? That's a very exciting science that is going on at the moment and contributing in a global way to bedside treatment of the individual at an individual level. Of course, the people who play a major, major role in this whole cascade of screening, etc., are our genetic counselors. Counselors assist the clinicians by being able to identify the problems, offer the subjects or patients that come to them with the content of the particular disease, their choices, etc. So clinical geneticists perform the actual clinical examination, order different types of laboratory tests, and then as a team, the clinician together with the genetic counselor will engage with the subjects. Now, one of the problems is communication by way of language. Many of the people who provide these sorts of services do not speak the local language. The other complication is the cultural interpretation of diseases. So for example, albinism, which is the result of a deletion on one of the chromosomes that results in pigmentary problems, which is quite widespread throughout Africa. Children with albinism are killed because their body parts get sold for thousands of US dollars. I mean, in South Africa, for example, the chair of the albinism engagement actually took this all the way to the ministerial level to have advocacy for gene defects, etc. And it is a serious, serious problem. Then there's myths associated with some of the diseases. And so when you, in the service provision, need to engage with families with such problems, you need to understand the cultural background, have people who can communicate in the language that is accessible to your subjects to be able to deliver that sort of messaging, etc. So there's a lot that needs to be taken cognizance of when dealing with genetic problems at the various intersectionality of our society. And then when you come to the learning issues, we know that, as Prof. Keith mentioned, that there's a significant proportion of our people who have such disabilities that are excluded from quality education, even though our Constitution says that they all should have access to it. And this is particularly a problem in the low-income communities. I mean, you can imagine, just to share a personal example, when I was traveling with my mum in 2004 in Australia, she suffered a stroke. The stroke left her paralyzed on the entire left side of her body. This was a woman who was a teacher, who articulated, the best engagement at different levels as a teacher. And after that, she just down spiraled with the mental capacities, because the area of her brain that was affected not only left her physically disabled, but also had very, mental challenges. When I had her assessed, I was told that her mental capacity was reduced to an 8 to a 10-year-old. You're dealing with your mother, who was your life base as you grow up, and now you need to provide the support to engage with this. Now, fortunately, coming from the medical environment, I had friends at the university who were neurologists, and all the needs that she had it. Through my friends and the network, I had the support. What of the average person on the street who doesn't have that? You warm your backside on a seat as you go to clinics, walking long distances to take a patient. The infrastructure for service of people who require medical attention is poor. We all know this. And so what I'm saying is, collectively, we need to understand the kind of struggles that people have access to for meaningful education for their children. I mean, you as a parent and you have a child with these problems, you go knocking at doors and all you get is, blanks. You don't really advance. So we have statistics about the numbers, etc. And for example, the 2011 census said that disability in the age bracket from 5 to 15 years old was estimated at around 6%. 11 out of 12 learners with disabilities had not even had access to a school system. The specialized needs that you need for people with disabilities, there's statistics on the website for the numbers that we have in the country and the total numbers per province, etc. But the problem is, even for children with visual impairment, they cannot take math and science at matric level because there's no infrastructure to assist with all of these. So the long and the short end of the story is that we live in a society that is unequal in many, many ways. You can't just say, well, apartheid was the cause of all of this. We need to redress the insufficiency of environments to promote every single person having access to education and skill sets that empower them to do better in their lives going forward. And access to quality education is absolutely pivotal to ensure this. The state of education for learners with disability is in a crisis within a crisis. And I think we all need to step up to the challenge of sometimes just taking ourselves out of our daily routines. And then just imagine how difficult it is for a person in a wheelchair to get to places. How difficult it is a person with visual impairments to get around. And I was told that in South Africa, at least when you see somebody who has a problem, you're always ready to help. But in places like the US, etc., where you think that they're much, much further advanced on it, people still have problems. So colleagues, I want to say that we have experts in the room, and I'm very, very keen to see the kind of dialogue we have on this. And let us not forget that collectively, as we do our day jobs in our specific disciplines, give a thought to people with disability, give a thought to the people who are elderly, give a thought to the youth who are striving to establish themselves in this very challenging environment. And if we each do one little thing in one of those topics and others, as a collective we would have contributed in a kind of more significant way. Thank you for your attention and look forward to further discussion.
Thank you, Prof. Yimla, for that inspiring talk. I think that clearly we need to be the change and probably be the catalyst that actually change the future, because I think if everybody tries to make a difference, we probably can change for future generations. And so I think it just needs awareness, and we need to make a difference as a whole. Thank you so much for the talk. Our next speaker is going to address the barriers of inclusion at the grassroots level. Mr. Andile Sawanogaga. So I just can go to his, sorry, his, on the wrong slide, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Nogaga. You can come on. So, he's an acting chief education specialist for education in social supporting services at the Nelson Mandela Bay District, and he has many years of teaching experience. Thank you so much. You can take the.
Let me take this opportunity to greet the program director, Dr. Govender, and also the acting vice chancellor, Professor Kit, the university management and the faculty management, and the colleagues that are here from other institutions of higher learning. Good afternoon, colleagues. As Doc has already indicated, that I'm from the Department of Basic Education. Just go back. Yes. Yeah. respect. Thank you very much. My brief was to deal with the issues, the barriers of inclusion at grassroots level, meaning that at the school level. I think I must pass on to the next slide. What is it? Okay. Let me go back to the outline of the presentation in terms of the issues that I will be covering. I will be covering the issues of the legislative framework that guides us as the Department of Education in terms of dealing with learners with disabilities and as well as young people with disabilities. We'll move on to understanding what inclusion is, and as well as the barriers to learning, and as well as then the main topic of barriers of inclusion at our grassroots level. And then we'll try and come with recommendations, that is the mitigation factors, and as well as solutions to the challenges that will be presented. Then moving to the legislation, I'm happy that it was covered by the previous speakers in terms of what legislation that guides us as the Department of Basic Education. We start with White Paper 6. All the previous speakers made mention of White Paper 6 of 2001. So we are guided by that as a department. Further than that, we also have other guidelines that have been developed, like the ones to ensure quality and support in special schools, and as well as special schools as resource centers, and as well as the guidelines for full service schools or inclusive schools, and as well as the guidelines for responding to learner diversity in the classroom of 2011, and as well as the policy on screening, identification, assessment, as well as support. The policy that is called SIAS policy. That's the policy that we use in terms of giving support to learners. By moving on to the understanding of inclusion, we take it from the definition that was given by UNESCO, that is your United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, that they gave in 2008, where they define inclusion as a process of addressing and responding to students' diversity by increasing their participation in learning, cultures and communities, and as well as reducing exclusion within and from education. Then these are the barriers then that we're talking about. The barriers are like obstacles or constraints that are causing learners, young people, can be adults, not to get what we call effective learning and as well as teaching. So these are the types of barriers. Then, as we are saying, it refers to difficulties. They can arise from within the education system itself. Not only there, but they can also arise from a learning site. Can be a school, can be a classroom. They can also, they will prevent the access to learning and as well as development of some of the learners. Mentioned here there that there are those that are systemic barriers that are coming from the system. Like, for instance, overcrowded classrooms. Those are the systemic barriers that will cause effective teaching and learning not to take place. You can see so many examples. Inaccessible school buildings. It was mentioned here by the previous speakers that amongst other things that are barrier to inclusion, it's infrastructure. That is your school buildings and so on. Then the other barriers are coming from the society, what we call societal barriers. Society can be able to judge people and can be in a position to stigmatize and label. So those are the ones that we can mention there. The issue of poverty also comes to play when it comes to societal barriers and the other diseases, and as well as the child-headed households. Those are the examples of societal barriers. There are also barriers that are called pedagogical barriers. These are educational barriers. For instance, inappropriate teaching methods. Teachers might be able to employ those, and those might not be able to get other learners to be able to access inclusion. Like even the learner-teacher support material that they would use. If a teacher has got a learner who's visually impaired and does not accommodate that particular learner in terms of adapting the curriculum to suit and differentiate the curriculum to cater for all the learners in the classroom, that becomes a pedagogical barrier. Then we've got those that are called intrinsic barriers that are coming from located within the learner herself or himself. Those might be sensory issues and as well as neurological challenges. Then let's move then to the main barriers that are causing challenges at the level of the schools as grassroots level. First and foremost, we'll mention that we've got limited number of special needs schools. I've mentioned 17. 17 is within this district. We're in Nelson Mandela Bay. So we've got 17 of special needs school. Because you cannot do away with special needs school because we are talking about inclusion. Because all learners need to be supported, but there will always be those that need high intensive support. So then therefore you will have to have special needs schools. We've got 17 in Nelson Mandela Bay district, and in the provinces, Eastern Cape, we've got 45 of those special needs schools. So the chunk of them is within this district, that is Nelson Mandela Bay. Then that becomes a barrier because some other districts do not even have, we've got 12 districts in the province, they do not even have those special needs schools. So even those that are 17 that we mentioned here in Nelson Mandela, these are provincial schools. We are not claiming them as Nelson Mandela. The learners that are there in the hostels are learners that are coming from outside the district within the Eastern Cape province. The other challenge is the lack of parental involvement in terms of the children. Some of the parents, I'm sure, would know, they would keep these learners, some of them with disabilities at home, and not register them with schools. So that's another challenge that we can also put there. The other one is the marginalization and the stigmatization and the labeling of these special schools themselves by the community, saying these are schools for learners that academically are not doing well, and then they will call them names. And as a result, parents wouldn't want their children to go to the schools. And that causes then those learners, it's either they stay at home with their challenges because the community is judging them. Then the other one is that the physical inaccessibility, I think it was also mentioned by the previous speakers. That's another challenge whereby there are no ramps in our institutions, schools. Some others do not even have elevators, even if they got double-story buildings. And as well as some other schools do not even have wide corridors for learners who are wheelchair users to be able to access them. The other challenge is transport. Transport is also a factor that causes exclusion. There was some transport might not be able to cater and being sensitized to be able to cater for young people or learners with disabilities. Some transport do not even want to use and take learners with wheelchairs in terms of their transport. Even the system, the bus systems and the municipalities, they don't cater for persons with disabilities. And then, as well as the teachers, at times, the teachers may not know how to deal and respond to learners with disabilities. Maybe they are not well trained to be able to deal with that. So they might also be able to deal with this and cause some other learners to drop out because of the attitude of the educators. The educators will tend to move with those that are moving and don't even differentiate the curriculum so that they can be able to accommodate all of them. Then the other one is inadequate funding. The inadequate funding also plays a factor here because it limits the implementation of inclusion. And also specialists, we lack a specialist in terms of ensuring that these learners are assessed. Let me move then to the last slide, that talks to mitigation factors and as well as recommendations. We feel that there is a need to have more special needs schools so that we can be able to accommodate. As you can see, advocacy and as well as awareness. Colleagues, thank you very much. I'm running out of time. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much for that informative talk. I think now we're going to address the barriers of inclusion at higher institution levels, and we're going to have Dr. Nosipho Delubom, and she will be addressing, but I don't want to keep you too long for lunch, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kavenda. I am only given 5 minutes. Priscilla just threatened me before I come to the fore. The topic that I'm given is the barriers of inclusion on higher learning institutions. Maybe if I can open my talk, I want to say that when it comes to the issues of inclusion of persons with disabilities, the most barrier is an attitude. That is the barrier that can prevent persons with disabilities or students with disabilities to have an access to the institutions of higher learning. So that means if we can change the mind on how we perceive disabilities, then we can have talks like this. Nevertheless, the Constitution, which I think is the most primary legislative framework, it states that, or it places a positive duty on the state to respect, promote, protect, and fulfill the rights of the Bill of Rights, including the rights of persons with disabilities. And it does so through the legal framework, which creates primary responsibilities on key government departments and institutions of higher learning to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities. The previous speakers did mention about the white paper that was issued in 2001, which is 23 years now. And the paper was never reviewed. It was only this year whereby there was a ministerial review of the paper. Now, if we can go back after the democratic elections in 1994, there was a move when it comes to the retention of students with disabilities in South African higher education institutions, whereby some institutions established the disability units, and at the time, those units were by the way thoughts. There was no priority that was given to them. Some of them didn't even know what was their function because they were the administrative offices. Because at the time, maybe we were not sure of what exactly we wanted to do in the institutions of higher learning. Even today, there are institutions whereby these units are not given much priority in terms of operations and the budget. However, there are strides that were done to mainstream or integrate students with disabilities in the institutions of higher learning, such that in 2018, the strategic policy framework on disability for the post-school education and training system called upon South African higher education institutions to not only focus on the access, because we tend to put these concepts in one line. We talk about access, we talk about equality, we talk about equity, we talk about retention. But now, the policy, the strategic policy framework mentioned the issue of retention and the participation with success. That means these students can gain an access to the institutions of higher learning, but if they are not given an opportunity to participate in all programs, co-curricular activities, so that they enjoy the campus life, and the issue of retention for these students when they are enrolled. It is very common to hear the questions that say, are they progressing academically? Why do we ask such questions? Because when they are admitted to the university, they are not given an unfair advantage. They are admitted because they qualify, they meet the admission requirements. Now, in order for us to achieve the goal that is stated in the strategic policy framework on disability for the post-school education and training system, then it means that we need to co-create and rethink about how do we provide support, how do we dismantle the barriers that affect these students at the higher learning, as we know that they are confronted with unique, unsurmountable barriers that hinder their opportunities to participate with success at an equal level as their non-disabled peers. Mr. Nogaga mentions the issue of special schools, and he knows that I am an advocate of saying the special schools must be dissolved in the system, because special schools, in my view, is a barrier for these learners to access, because they are segregated there. And unfortunately, there are no special universities. There are no special TVET colleges. So when these students, or when these learners rather, are coming to the universities, then there is a barrier for them to adapt, to transition from the special school to the universities. Then there is this category of disability that I want to mention, learners who are deaf. The issue of deaf inclusion is still a challenge in most institutions of higher learning. For instance, if I can mention the number of special schools that accommodate learners who are deaf or hard of hearing in the Eastern Cape province alone, there are 4. And the universities in the Eastern Cape province alone are 5, if I calculate UNISA. In all these universities, there is no student who is deaf. So that means the issue of access is a barrier for these students to learn, to access the tertiary education. Now, there is a call for us as researchers to establish what is the problem. Why don't we have these students in our universities? And nationally, we are still calculating not more than 5 universities that have students who are deaf. Now we are talking about deaf-blind, we are talking about hard of hearing, students who depend upon the South African Sign Language. And then the access is a barrier because most of these universities do not have the sign language interpreters in their payroll. Then the issue, I'm not going to talk about the infrastructure accessibility as a barrier because it was mentioned. So in my view, there is a need to rethink research approaches and practices and seek to create a balance between Ubuntu, social justice, and scientific pursuits. And reflecting on that as researchers, we may tend to be guided by institutions' research output goals, which I'm not sure whether our research output goals, do they include the issues of universal access, disability matters, and so forth. So I want to challenge us that we need to go back and see if is there enough research outputs that are addressing the issues of access of students who have disabilities. Another thing, there is a disjuncture between the Department of Basic Education and the universities. It's very common not to know DBE, they don't know what is it that we are doing at the universities in terms of creating access for students who have disabilities. And as universities, maybe we don't create any conversation to challenge the Department of Basic Education when it comes to the issues of subject offerings, especially in the special schools. Hi, Dr. Govender, don't threaten me. Then the lack of effective collaboration with education stakeholders in South Africa that also impact the lack of support and retention initiatives in higher education. Then the last barrier can be the disability disclosure, especially the invisible disabilities, because students who have invisible disabilities, sometimes they are not sure whether to disclose their disabilities because they have the fear of being discriminated and the attitude. So there is a crucial need for constant consultation with people who have disabilities, lived experiences to ensure learning and teaching response to call for universal learning in higher education. And this will access and retain students with disabilities in higher education while yielding to the call for universal access. Then my last point on recommendation is that, as it has been indicated by the previous speakers, it is very crucial to incorporate universal design to learning as means of addressing the implicated cost implications of including specifically students who are deaf. So the UDL must be something that we consider to incorporate in our classrooms. And perhaps there is a need for disability integrated support with academic projects, and involvement of students is very critical. We have to listen to their voice, because reasonable accommodations is not one size fits all. So we need to listen to the voice of students. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. You have a mic for the... Okay. So I think we're over time, but I will... I just want to ask the panel a question. So Dr. Nwanze, you can join the panel. So as he's making his way to the stage, I have I think I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot that needs to be addressed, and there's a lot of change that needs to occur in order for us to move forward and actually make changes, and that's actually going to be in the institutions. I think it's something that it's worth advocating for. We need to change. We need to be the change that we want to see. Because, but the question that I do have is for, I think, scientists in general, because I'm in the science faculty and field, biochemistry, there's very few scientists with disabilities. So in terms of inclusion, you know, if you have a disability and you're not allowed to study science and maths, and you want to be a scientist, I think that's something that's quite discriminating. And so the one question that I do have is, people with disabilities, how would we, in the future, include them into the job sector? So how would they study, let's say, in institutions, and then after that be included into the job sector if they do declare that they have disabilities and they get discriminated? So I think it's something, does anyone want to try to answer? Okay.
Hello? I can start. Thank you. Now, it's a discussion we're having, and it's that view that I have. So I work with the undergraduate program. We have an undergraduate program called the Higher Certificate in Disability Practice, and it looks at skilling home-based carers to be able to, you know, they just go and identify, screen persons with disabilities, and then refer to the professionals. So they are more kind of what you call generic workers. They work across the professions. Now, what happens is that they are done being taught working generically, but they go into a community that works specifically. So you can see how what they are taught is not translating to what they are seeing in the society. So for me, looking at employment for persons with disabilities, curriculum is critical. Curriculum is a vehicle for transformation, because who runs those agencies, who runs those organizations? They are people who have not had knowledge about disability. In their curriculum, when they were at university, they have little or few contributions or knowledge about disability. So we need to be able to infuse disability, integrate in an integrated way into the curriculum, so that those that graduate and go and build your bridges and run your future tech companies, and they have an awareness of disability, they are more likely to then start the mind shift. They are more likely to then start looking at, okay, when a person with disability wants to come and work in my firm, what is my firm doing to make sure that they're able to succeed? So I would say to start off with curriculum transformation, and so that means it's a lot of work for us academics, because we have to shift our minds first so that we can shift the minds of our students. Our students go into the society, they shift the society, and then you now see that persons with disabilities. But also, just lastly, also that means that accessible ways in which these the job market works and everything also needs to be looked at. So that's one thing I want to contribute. Thanks.
Thank you. Is anyone else?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so that's one question that we could address. But in terms of inclusion, how do you think that we should be more inclusive and include, you know, to break down the stigmatism and the stereotyping in society? Is there ways that we could try to address at the grassroots and institutional levels where we can bring about more awareness and try to include people with disabilities into institutions without the stereotyping and stigmatism?
It goes back to what I said in my opening statement, the issue of attitude. Because if there is a shift in our mind, then we are going to understand that disability cut across. It doesn't choose the race, gender, or anything, but it cut across. So we need to change the attitude to understand that you can have a disability tomorrow because of an accident. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. And when you have a disability, then it doesn't mean that it's the end of the life. You need to go on. So the way we perceive disability, we must perceive it as a human right matter. It's something, it's not negotiable. So that is my short answer. Change attitude.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to invite Professor Faleni from UNISA and SAYA's Working Group 3 to give us the closing remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Dr. Kamini for moderating this educational and insightful session. So we've heard from all the speakers that there is a real challenge that we're facing, especially people with disabilities. So what was resonating from all the speakers is that there's an issue of inclusiveness, the issue of discrimination, as well as the issue of insufficient support. And one of the resolutions that was coming from all the speakers is that there's a need for ensuring that there are colleges or schools of special needs, especially in the Eastern Cape. I'm from Kofinfaba, so I do understand that there are lack of schools that side. Also, some of the speakers talked about training teachers or professors or lecturers and having accessible curriculum at basic education as well as the universities. In that way, I think that the issue of inclusiveness will be resolved. Another part is that we need to have an educational policy that will ensure that the people with disabilities are not discriminated. And Dr. Nwanze talked about artificial intelligence because the research now is moving towards artificial intelligence. I think if we can include that learning system, we will be able to fight and to be able to include all the learners as well as people with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending this session.
AI. VideoGen is a website into unique, copyright-free videos with one click. No camera, no microphone, no editing, it feels like magic. Create landscape or portrait videos. Use an AI narrator that speaks over 50 languages or choose from VideoGen's music. Script or don't. VideoGen can generate your script for you. Just choose a writing style and type a few ideas for your new video. Your thoughts, your stories, your message to an audience, coworkers, students, to your customers. There's a button somewhere on or around this video. Click on that and it'll take you to a page where you can sign up and generate a free video in only a few seconds. Hundreds of thousands of others, including people from Google, TikTok, Airbus, Dell, are already using VideoGen to engage their audiences. Click the link and try it out. Why not? It's free.
Do you know the many surprising connections between the deepest parts of space and the deepest recesses of our ocean? Both are cold, dark places where humans cannot breathe and where the pressure alone is enough to kill you. Both upset our normal experiences of gravity, providing explorers with a strange weightlessness or buoyancy if they could somehow survive being there in the first place. And both contain many unsolved, captivating mysteries. Our oceans are filled with life we've never seen before. And who can say what lurks in the unexplored corners of space? I was initially caught off guard when I heard that NASA had turned its attention towards exploring the hadal zones deep in the ocean. After all, NASA is normally about space. What are they doing deep under the water? And on Earth? I'm Alex McColgan and you're watching Astrum. Put on your diving gear and join me in a world of undersea facilities, uncanny life, and an environment so hostile we've mapped more of Mars than of this terrain on our own planet. In 1957, a year before NASA was founded, a paper published by the Journal of the Royal Society of Arts claimed the deep oceans covered over 2/3 of the surface of the world, and yet more is known about the shape and surface of the moon than is known about that of the bottom of the ocean. This was a reference to the fact that in the world before echo-sounding technology was commonly used to map the seafloor, we didn't know much about the topography of what was down there. We've come a long way since then, but while we have mapped the moon thanks to satellites and telescopes, we have still only mapped 23.4% of the ocean floor in high resolution. In fairness, this still represents an area of 120 million square kilometers, about 3 times the moon's surface area, so the old saying no longer holds entirely true. Hence why we can instead talk of Mars, which has a surface area of 145 million square kilometers. But still, it's a profound gap in our knowledge of our own world. NASA was founded in 1958 with the purpose of expanding human knowledge of phenomena in the atmosphere and in outer space, and developing vehicles and technologies that would help them to do so. Exploring the ocean was not originally on their radar, or sonar. However, in 1978, NASA began monitoring the ocean with their first dedicated oceanographic satellite, CSAT, which was capable of collecting data on sea surface winds, surface temperatures, wave heights, and other features. This helped them learn more about our planet's oceans and their impact on the global climate. Still, some of NASA's most exciting forays into the ocean only began at the turn of the millennium. One way in which the sea can prepare astronauts for space is through simulated space experiences. About 8.7 kilometers off Key Largo in Florida is the world's only undersea research laboratory, Aquarius Reef Base. Built in 1986, it is a small, 3-roomed habitat large enough to house 6 people at a push, with a main room that combines sleeping and living quarters, an entry dock, and a wet porch for entering the sea around it. It was originally designed to help aquanauts remain at the bottom of the sea for weeks at a time through a technique known as saturation diving. By remaining at the depth of 19 meters, the human body becomes saturated with gas dissolved in its bloodstream, which allows these researchers to stay at depth without ill effects for much longer periods of time, 9 hours for one dive, rather than 1 or 2 hours. This made it ideal for biologists wanting to study the local environment in situ. In 2001, however, NASA, along with other space agencies such as ESA, realized that it made a great space training location. The cramped living conditions mimic those found on the International Space Station, so astronauts who spent a week at Aquarius Reef Base would get a vital taster of what life would be like up there. It also allowed them to practice performing experiments and generally get used to the expected and unexpected aspects of life in a hostile environment. NASA began the NEMO program, or the NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations, and that same year began sending their astronauts to the habitat. There have been 23 NEMO missions since then, merging astronaut crews from a variety of different space agencies, which lasted up to 3 weeks. Astronauts there became aquanauts and got the chance to don deep spacesuits, getting a taste for what spacewalks might be like outside of our planet, readying them for the day humans return to the moon or go to Mars. This was not the only use NASA had for the ocean, however. Perhaps the most significant training was not for NASA's astronauts, but rather for the machines that would one day visit the largest oceans outside of planet Earth. Let's now go deeper and consider the exploration of alien oceans.
Okay, well, welcome to another edition of Mining Now, and I'm excited to be joined by Anusha Brahimi, who's principal consultant with SRK, and I'm familiar with SRK, so I'm interested in what the group is doing and getting an update. But first of all, I want to hear a bit about yourself. What's been your journey to where you are today in your consulting and dealing with young people in our industry?
Yeah, I'm a mining engineer by training and by experience. I am with SRK since 2010 as associate, and then since 2013 as a full-time employee. And what I do is simply surface mine planning and design, and I do evaluation, I do due diligences, and from very conceptual studies to detailed studies and construction. We also do the optimization, means that operating mines, if they need any help to optimize some part of their operation, we help them to improve, some aspects that they have problems. So that's main part of our work, and in our team we have a big pool of different professionals.
It's a big group.
Yeah, so we cover almost everything: mining, geology, geotech, and geoenvironment, permitting, you name it. Anything that is related to mining industry, we cover it. We have offices around the world. Here in Vancouver, we have a big office, actually very close to this convention, with a good view.
Yeah, well, that's always a plus. And so I mentioned before, I am familiar with SRK, have done work with them before, but I wasn't too aware of the history.
Our solar system is home to many large oceans outside of Earth. Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus, to name just two, have significant bodies of water beneath their kilometer-thick icy surfaces. In spite of only being 1/4 of the Earth's diameter, scientists believe that Europa holds twice as much water as all of our oceans combined. This is an intriguing concept, as even though no sunlight penetrates down to those depths, the mixture of liquid water bordering a rocky inner crust would make both of these locations ideal candidates for life. Scientists have considered how to best test to see if life really has arisen in the oceans of icy moons. In 2024, NASA will launch the Europa Clipper, with the mission to fly by the moon Europa and scan it to learn more about the depth of its icy shell, to try to determine the composition of its oceans, and generally get a better picture of the moon as a whole. However, Europa Clipper will only be laying the groundwork for future missions, which one day might see cryobots melting through the 10-kilometer thick icy shell of Europa using nuclear-powered radiators to penetrate its oceans and see firsthand what lies below. Once down there, no radio signal will be able to reach them easily. Messages will be relayed via a vast cable brought down through the ice along with the cryobot. This means that such cryobots will need to be able to autonomously descend a further 100 to 200 kilometers to explore the dark, chilling, and highly pressurized environment they're likely to find, to see what alien life might swim in those waters. So, with a mission objective on the horizon to explore deep, dark waters in search of never before seen life, what better place to start than the unexplored oceans we already have at home? The deepest parts of the oceans on Earth are only 11 kilometers deep, but due to the gravitational differences between Europa and Earth, the pressure you'd experience between the two are much more comparable than you might think. Europa's 100-kilometer deep ocean is thought to have a hydrostatic pressure between 130 to 260 megapascals, which, if it existed in an ocean on Earth, would equate to a depth of around 13 to 26 kilometers. This is much better than if you'd had to go hundreds of kilometers down on Earth, but it's still no picnic. Pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest place in our ocean, is 1,100 times the pressure on the surface, which is enough to crush the individual cells in the human body, or to implode most submarines. And yet, life survives there. And it doesn't just survive, it thrives. The deep-sea explorers of the Galapagos hydrothermal expedition in 1977, using a specially reinforced remotely operated vehicle that could survive those pressures, were shocked to discover not a barren wasteland, but thriving ecosystems gathered around hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor down there. Tube worms, crabs, and fish were found in rich abundance. As scientists perform more dives,
1, 2. Why is there audio?
One, oh, these are the mains. 1, 2. 1. 1.
1, 2. So it is coming through my computer, through the Focusrite. But why is there a delay? Because if I put my headphones on, 1, 2. This is like immediate. You can listen to it. It's like 1, 2. Is there any output coming from me? 1, 2. Okay, so it is coming from my side because now I've muted. I've now killed audio going back into there. I don't know why it's still going out, but now there's nothing coming from me. Two. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 1, 2.
Where are you receiving audio from here?
Yes. Question just is why are we not...
Is this your connection? Does this
Yes, yes. Line out's going there. Question is why are you not getting any sound from main out? Why is there nothing going to the speaker? Or it's... because there's actually nothing going to the speaker because that was coming from the computer.
Are the speakers on?
Mark, is this... Yeah, they were giving... that was coming from the TV or from the speakers. It was... If nobody changed it, then it should still be fine. It was... right earlier. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. One, 2. 1, 2. Yeah, much better. 1, 2. And Mark, just switch that camera on. Mark, just switch that camera on as well, and the transmitter. 1, 2, something, something, something. Here we are today at the very prestigious Enemy Research Week. 1, 2. You happy? I won't. I mean, I don't. Try not to touch that mixer. My audio is perfect on this as well. It's immediate. Happy? It's like, yeah. 1, 2. Okay. All right.
Just keep it flat with the cut at the top slightly. And that's it.
Okay.
What other microphone is there?
It's probably that one.
Alright, then we drop the phone.
Who's? Which mic is the presenter going to speak from? Because we need to get her speaking into a
You
mic.
can give the presenter any of the mics.
Do you think they might want to have a mic stand?
No,
Not.
they like holding
Okay.
it. Take it too.
Okay, sure.
Are you the speaker, man?
No, I'm the moderator.
Okay.
You the presenter, sir?
Yeah, but I think you are the chair for this.
No, I'm the sound and video.
Oh, I'm looking for Prof. Dan.
Prof.
The
Dan.
chairperson. Maybe she's the one.
Yeah, she said something about she's a moderator or something.
Yes, exactly.
Ask her.
Hello, Prof. Yes. I think I was moved to this session louder because my study and team that I see
This microphone over
We have to talk to Dr. Mobi.
present and they just use it.
I think I mind it.
We have to go to that name, talk to the moderator there, or the moderator will direct you. Where is it here?
No.
So, yeah, go to the venue today and talk to Dr. Ahmed. She's the moderator. Should be inside.
I think it's
better to just load all the presentations and call it the speakers. Can you please load your presentations if you've not loaded them? Did you load your presentation? have 15 minutes, but when it's 10 minutes, I'll show you a sign so that you know that you are left with 5 minutes to complete your presentation. I would like to call the first speaker, Ngongoma.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Mbulelo Ngongoma, and I will be presenting to you under the topic by design and modeling of a deep learning-based hybrid fruit disease quality and monitoring sorting model, which I termed HD QMS model. So basically, this is a model which performs various agricultural operations such as disease detection, quality monitoring, and sorting, as well as grading. So this is the content of my presentation. I'll just be going through all the steps and developments that led me to designing this proposed model, which I termed HDQMS. All right, so when I did a literature survey, I found these three compelling reasons why I believe we as researchers and scholars should put more focus on addressing agricultural problems. The first one is hunger. As we can see on this heat map here, it is clearly visible that majority of African states are living under serious to severe hunger situation. The second one is the dependability of our economy to the agricultural sector. In South Africa alone, data is showing that in 2022, we exported agricultural produce which valued 12.8 billion, and a majority of those were, the major contributors were citrus fruits, oranges, sugarcane, and maize. The third reason is the food security glide path. So this graph here, which is shown in this slide, investigated the rate of change of food insecurity standard across different states in Africa. As it can be seen, though these different states experienced an unequal rate of food insecurity levels, but what is notable is that all of them recorded an average increase. So when I drill down to the issues of agriculture, I noticed that crop diseases are one of the major contributors to loss of farm yield. It is estimated that between 20 to 40% of farm yield is lost to diseases and pests. Unfortunately, in the African context, we still rely mainly on manual and traditional methods of detecting plant or crop diseases. This method is inaccurate, dangerous, and very slow. Some established farms tend to send samples abroad to experts for them to classify diseases. Also, this option is problematic because it is expensive, one. Secondly, it has got high turnaround times, which end up giving farmers less time to react. In more economically developed states, there have been an increase in adopting digital technologies, such as these photos that are included in this presentation. You can see there a robotic, which is used to traverse through farms as it take pictures and classify. These are mainly based on artificial intelligence, machine learning. However, this technology is still faced with some conceptual challenges, which was the major motive for my study. The major conceptual challenge that I noticed with these artificial intelligence-based plant disease detection models is that they use single input images to take single snapshots where they then send these images into machine learning to perform a classification. That setup is appropriate for samples such as leaves which are flat. It becomes a challenge when samples such as fruits which are spherical or cylindrical in nature, where you can have blind spots. For example, if we look at this orange image that I've featured here, we can see that only about 20% of the surface area is showing the symptom of black rot, while the rest of the orange is seemingly healthy. So if this fruit were to be passed through the traditional model that I've just explained, such that this diseased area is on the blind spot of the camera, then this orange could have mistakenly been classified as a healthy orange. So that's a major challenge. Another issue that I've picked up is the issue of sorting fruits. Fruits do get damaged during cultivation because of various reasons. One of them is the interaction with wildlife, as I have put this image of a bird pecking an orange. Also, the tools which are used during harvesting are also incurring damages to fruits. Some unfavorable weather conditions, such as hail, will seldom incur damages also. Now, even established farms, I found that they still rely on manual sorting, which is very slow and is susceptible to errors because people are using their discretion to classify, to determine classes. So those are the major problems that I was trying to solve. So the objectives of the study in solving the identified challenges, the first one was to design a three-dimensional fruit disease model. So this model is the one that is not susceptible to blind spot, that can be able to take the right round image of either a spherical or cylindrical fruit, such that the classification is based on the full image rather than just a small section. The second objective was to compare this three-dimensional model to the traditional one to see how effective it is. The third objective was to now apply the findings that were developed during the design of a three-dimensional model into now the HD QMS. This slide is showing the conceptualization method as well as the modeling. So to save time, I won't go into much detail, but I had options when I was designing this model. The first one was to have a single image sensor, which is a camera, and design a revolving stand, which is able to revolve while the camera takes snapshots such that the full surface area is covered. The second option was to have multiple cameras. So it was a trade-off between the mean classification time. How long do I want the model to take to perform a classification? So this is the one I trialed, where I have a single image and a stand which revolves. Bullet points here show the critical parameters that I named on this setup here, and the modeling equations which I then used to optimize some parameters. So the classification rule for this model was slightly different to the one of traditional model. So the rule was that if any of these multiple images that were taken on the right round surface of the fruit, if at least one of that image is classified as diseased, then you take the full classification. Even if, let's say, maybe this system was able to take 5 images, and then these images, 4 of them are showing healthy, while 1 is showing symptoms of a disease. The one which shows symptoms overrides the full results, right? This is the setup of the system where I have the camera, the sample stand, then the classification model. So the model that I used to perform the classification is GoogleNet. I took GoogleNet and I applied transfer learning to train GoogleNet to be able to classify a disease of black rot. I chose black rot as my testing disease on oranges because it's the most abundant one. And when I did my search, I found that it's waterborne and airborne, so it's easy for black rot to be transmitted amongst fruits. Okay, then I did my testing. So for simplicity, I took the critical parameters as D equal to 0.65 meters. D is the distance between the sample stand, 5 minutes, okay. Is the distance between the sample stand and the image sensor. N equals to 1, which is the number of turns. These are the results that I took. So in testing this model, I chose 3 samples. The first sample is the one which was healthy. It's more like a control. The second sample was the one which was diseased by, but it had uniform distribution of disease symptoms. The third one was a disease sample, but where we get the rest of the orange healthy and just few symptoms. I tested this model on all these 3 cases. All the results came positive. It classified correctly. I then took the proposed model versus the traditional model. As we can see here on the results, the healthy orange was classified healthy by both of these models. The one with uniform symptoms also correctly. The issue occurred when there was an uneven distribution of symptoms. The classical model did a mistake while the proposed model managed to classify it correctly. So this showcased the capability of the proposed model over the previous model. So this is the main system now which performs sorting. I took the model that I have designed into this big block, this big black block. And there are actuators positioned here. So you've got different bins. This system is designed such that when a fruit comes, the bigger the main model does the classification, and then the fruit will be directed to the correct bin, whether it's diseased or healthy. These are the testing results. These are the testing results of this model, and then here, if I also looked at the average classification accuracy, I found that for some classes I was getting low 70% classification accuracies, but this can be improved by increasing the amount of training data set and also increasing the variability of the data set that is used to train the model. On recommendations, I think there's a mistake here on the recommendations, but I believe that policymakers, if they could release funds that can be used to run commercial trials. There are funding that are allocated for running research, but we need funding to run like commercial trials to then be able to test these, because that will help to manufacture this type of technology locally and make it available even for developing farmers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ngongoma, for keeping it to time. Do we have comments or questions for our speaker? No comment? No question? Okay, okay.
So I'll just okay. How big of a data set did you use to train the model?
That was a challenge, that was a challenge. I even captured it on my second recommendation to say policymakers should facilitate relationship between concerned parties, expert researchers, and even farmers, because it becomes a challenge to get the actual data set. I recall having to go to vendors to buy samples of fruits. If I had an access to a farm, I would have been able to create as much huge data set as required. So I ended up using a little about 2,500 images, but I would have wanted to go up to 10,000 units. So it was also a limitation on my study.
Thank you, sir. Nice presentation. So just out of curiosity, was finances or cost not a factor when you were deciding which angle you were going to go with?
It was a factor. However, to tackle the financial issues, there are parts of this model that I left out, especially the mechanical part. So what I did is that I focused more on testing the control side of this model and left the mechanical part which would have incurred more costs on the model. So having the frame of the conveyor and all that stuff, I didn't put that in the motors, but I did design the controls of the motor. Yes. Yes.
Do we have more comments or questions for our speaker?
Thank you for.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, you had said something about a stand where the fruit is placed. So is the stand holding the fruit, or is it pierced through and then, yeah?
No, the stand is not holding the fruit. No, it's not piecing this fruit. It is holding it in place. So the way I picture it is that there will be the fruit presence sensor as the fruit comes, and then there will be collating pins to separate them, because then there needs to be distance between them as they come, and then it will be held in place. So the conveyor is moving, and there will be just a small mechanical rod which will prevent it from moving forward while the stand is revolving and the image sensor taking images. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ngoma, for your question. Let us all give a round of applause for Mr. Ngoma. Our second speaker for this afternoon is Anne Tsebe. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Khabet Savesebe, so I'm going to be presenting to you a work titled An Automated Prediction of HIV Progression, which is a machine learning approach. So the world, as we know that we had introduced, the era of HIV just began from 1980s, early 1990s, and since then, the world has evolved, has advanced significantly towards treating of this particular virus. So according to some statistics, we have about 39 million who were living with HIV in 2022. We have about 1.3 million who contracted the virus, and about 630,000 individuals were living with particular virus. Now, in South Africa, anyone who tests a positive of this particular virus here has advantage of going for antiretrovirals, which are free. And then because of that, we have increased use of these ARVs. As a result, now these are accompanied by the emergence of HIV drug resistance. Now, this, as a result, it causes this virus to change its signatures. In other words, I'm saying the genetic makeover of this particular disease, it changes, resulting in some available ARVs not being able to prevent this disease. So due to this drug-resistant virus, the antiretrovirals that we have at the market, they stand a chance, or they face the challenge of not being, or being partially or fully inactive. So there is a need to find a way at which we can, or we can help who are prone to this particular virus, and then those who have, or who have stand much chances to develop this HIV-resistant drug. So the approach that we're using, we approach with this particular data set from the medical facilities. that we can try to come up with a way at which we can identify this particular individual at a faster rate. So we move towards machine learning algorithms. So the machine learning algorithms, what happens is a subset of artificial intelligence. So what happens is it tries to automate all the process that we are trying to do. So here we are trying to select those ones or predict those ones who are prone to go for HIV drug resistance. So what happens is we got the data set. The data set consists of about 4 columns. They have about reverse transcriptase sequences from these particular patients. We have the proctase sequences, we have the viral load, and then we have the number of CD4 counts. So we got that particular data from a medical facilities. What happens is we took that data as it is, and then we evaluated that particular data set. We found out within that data we had 2 classes. So what they do is to identify if you are more prone to progression, they check your viral load. Maybe the higher viral load, they say you are more prone to this particular going for drug resistance. So what happens is from that data set, what we do, because we need to do what you call the binary classification for that. So what we do, we put that data, we divide it into two sets, class 0 or class 1, binary classification 0 or 1. So in 0 we said now those ones, they are no progressions. But for class 1, that's where we had there is a progression. So now we took the data as it is. What we do, we pre-process that particular data. We run the level encoders. When we run the level encoder, it simply means now, since now the sequences, they come in form of a text, we need to convert that text into numerical values because the machines can only process the values that are numerical. So we run the BioPython to evaluate those particular sequences. So when we say now there's a genetic or there's a change in this sequence, it simply means one of the letter there, it changes either from A to C. So that's one thing we are looking at to see if indeed there's this progression. So what we map the higher viral load or the lower viral load to that particular sequence change. So we are looking at these 2 particular sequences. So when we run the level encoders, we change that to numbers, from the letters to numbers. And then what we do again, we split that particular data set into ratio of 8:2. Simply meaning we reserve about 20% of that particular data for testing this particular model, and then 80% of it we reserve it for training this particular model. So the models we are looking at in this study was a decision tree, logistic regression, and then the gradient boosting. So, but for us to be able to solve this problem we are faced, everyone knows, everyone working in this particular space of artificial intelligence, they're suffering from the data. They don't have much data set. So what we have unbalanced data. When we run this particular training model on this data set, what we have problems like overfitting or underfitting, which gives the wrong results. So now, that's one challenge. Everyone working in this particular space of artificial intelligence is facing. So what can we solve then? So what they say is, how accurate it becomes, it's just the quality of the data you have. So we have this unbalanced data set. What we do first, we use what you call synthetic minority oversampling technique. What happens is we go back to the data that we have, and then we look at the minority class. When we have the minority class in this particular case, they were those ones who are more to have high chances of progressing from normal HIV towards a drug-resistant HIV. So we use this technique to generate artificial data from the minority class. When you generate artificial data, what it means is now we're balancing that particular data, so the data becomes more balanced. And then afterwards, we repeat the same process where we split the data set and we rerun the model to see the performance. So what we want to do here with this particular case is we want to solve the issue of low data set with artificial data. So with the unbalanced data set, the data that we just got from these medical facilities, we just retrain this classical algorithm. The question would be, why classical algorithms? We don't have data. When you go towards the deep learning space, that's when you need to have much data set. But classical algorithm seems to be working perfectly with the limited data. So that's why we opted for this classical algorithm. So first, we had about the decision tree we performed with about 80% precision for about 200 patient samples that we got. So it simply means you have about 200 patients that you need to test. And then you identify these ones are more prone to go for progression. They're about 80% of that, and it's you only, if you are 80% classifying that about 200 people, for example, 80% accuracy, that there were more to go towards the progression, then that model seems to be a little bit good. And then the second one, which was the gradient boost, had about 81%, followed by logistic regression with 75%. But one of the most important things to confirm if indeed this is the high score, what we ran is we checked the F1 score. The F1 score is the ratio between the sensitivity and specificity. Simply means how accurate it is and how sensitive it can be. If maybe this sequence is not for HIV, for example, is another for another virus, can it just differentiate between those? So those were the kind of the things we're looking at. But one of the most important thing is we have 200 patients. How fast can we tell that each patient is, how fast can we predict in that case that this patient is more to go for drug-resistant HIV? Okay, say fine, we have about 200 samples, and then our decision tree, it performed that, or it evaluated 200 samples in about 0.6 seconds. That's how fast it was. And then the gradient boosting, it was about 0.25 seconds, which is a quarter of a second, but that was a much higher. And then we had a logistic regression with about 0.15. But now, one of the most interesting things is when we now balance the particular data set, we include the balance data, which we have artificial data, which we use as mode to do that particular one. The decision tree arose from the precision of 80% towards 98%. Simply means almost all of our patients were correctly predicted, those ones who were more to go for HIV resistant. And then this balancing of data does not only improve the accuracy of the machine learning algorithms. The most interesting thing is it as well reduces the time at which these machine learning algorithms, they can predict these HIV patients. Now, it gets to a point where we always talk about the higher data set. The more data you have in machine learning algorithms, that's been proven by this work that the more data you have, it simply means the model will be more accurate. Not only that is more accurate, but it take lesser time to predict the future predictions. And then we have about the gradient boosting which followed, which increased as well from 81% to about 87%. And then the time, it was 0.53 seconds, which increased now. And then we have the logistic regression as well, which had about 81% and 0.06 seconds. Now, the bigger finding, it comes with the gradient boosting. The gradient boosting, it uses what you call the function of functions to predict the negative gradient of how to predict this, to predict the final outcomes. So it increases time. Now, relating the gradient boosting with what we have in a deep learning algorithms is that when you optimize the deep learning models, what you want is to have a low learning rate. And when you have low learning rate, you increase the time of predicting that particular model. So that's one other thing we didn't move towards the deep learning models. And then the gradient boosting, which now serves as one of the functions that can be used in the deep learning model. It gives the reason why now with the deep learning models can take a little bit of time to predict this particular disease for going to progression. So, okay, fine. We say we have about 98% precision of this particular models. But how sure are we that that's indeed what we need? All right. So we did area under the curve to see which model performs better. And then you can see we have about 0.95 for decision tree, which is classified that that model was indeed an excellent performance when we were going for this prediction of HIV to drug-resistant HIV. So what we did in this work was just to automate these predictions, which was one of our aim, to automate the prediction with about a higher accuracy. And then not only that we were supposed to do the prediction, but one of the most important things we wanted to evaluate the performance of these machine learning algorithms, if indeed we can improve those performance, because the bigger problem is, can you improve them? Which method do you use to do that? And then with this particular technique, currently they have been testing it in some of the medical facilities there, so it could help some government to make some better decisions when it comes into AIDS strategies, and then to support the medical profession as well in monitoring this HIV progression. So for future recommendation, it could be that we could look at some of the optimization techniques to try to improve the performance of the low-performing models for this study. So I would like to stop here and thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Sebe, for keeping it to time. Do we have questions or comments?
Thank you. I wanted to ask, what are the drawbacks or the disadvantages of using the minority overfitting?
You mean the technique for balancing the data set? So one of the drawbacks is that it creates the data, it's not the original data there. So it might be wrong. So if it's wrong in that particular case, then it means you're going to have a wrong predictions. And you don't want the case to say someone is prone to a succession of HIV while they're not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Thank you so much, brother, for a nice presentation. I just wanted to ask just two things out of curiosity. The first one is, since you were working on this project which involved people which are life samples, did you have any issue with ethics clearance, something along those lines? That is the first one. The second one would be, did you validate the results that you got on live samples? Did you have a chance to do that? Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Oh, so starting with the ethical issues, the data set that we got is the data set that was provided as a text, .csv file. So it's they performed. They took whatever samples they took at the hospitals and then they transformed it into a digital file.
So we trust that they observed ethics themselves.
Yeah, we trust that.
Okay, no, it's not, okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other question? I'll take the last two.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I saw on your results slide, I see your precision and your recall, they are more or less the same. Did you maybe use any stack generalization, or is there a reason for that?
No, they were computed on a computational level from the confusion matrix. So when you run these models, the model calculates that for you from the confusion matrix of, what is that? There's a formula for calculating that particular one with checking your true positive and then your false positive, things like that. So it's on the computational level.
Oh, okay. I was asking because generally your precision recall graph should lean towards the right. So as your precision increases, your recall should decrease and vice versa. That's the reason why I was asking.
All right.
Okay, thanks for the nice presentation. My question is, what kind of conditions did you take into consideration? Is only like the positive diagnosis and then the drug that they're taking, or did you also consider like the living environment? Because sometimes the resistance can be because of the way the person is living, and then if you just say like, okay, it's just the resistance, but with the prediction, if you don't give it the right conditions, then it's not going to give you the right prediction.
Meaning considering conditions when you are training these algorithms?
When you are training the algorithms, yeah, which kind of conditions did you like impose on the model?
Okay, no, we didn't consider much of the conditions, but what we looked at, we were looking at just a viral load, the CD4 counts, and this mutation that happens on these sequences. Those are the things we are focusing on, not necessarily what causes maybe the change in the genomic signatures.
Yeah. Like you might need to just map on your data set, just map like
to that
yeah,
one,
like yeah, the living condition of the person, like yeah, if like it has an effect on
if
the
it does, or just to check
data,
if it
yeah,
does,
like on this CD4 count, like if there's any trend that you can
pick from there. Thank you very much for that. I will definitely look into it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Tsebe. Can we give a round of applause Our next speaker is T. Makamu.
Afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Chair, for giving me this opportunity to share a bit about the research we're working on. So mine is not too technical like the previous two speakers. It's on a lighter note, so it's comparative analysis of AI policies. And the reason behind this work is actually to forward kind of see or measure where we are in terms of AI policies and what policies should actually address. Also bearing in mind the sustainable development goals, as we've heard a lot in the first session. And borrowing the words of the acting vice chancellor of the university, he said, you know, there is a bright side of research and a dark side of research. So, and the reason I'm quoting that is why AI governance. So the bright side of AI governance is that it can swiftly, you know, has been integrated across diverse regions, societies, like the first speaker was showing with his research, and also industries. And it actually possesses, you know, like the ability to reshape individual lives, societies and regions, and also the environment. And the dark side of it is that this transformation comes with consequences if not managed. And some of these negative consequences is that if we don't impose governance to AI policies, then we will end up now having unequal societies. And we see this particularly happening a lot in the global south. South Africa, for instance, we know we have disparities when it comes to access. I remember a presenter in the first session also was talking about digital access. We know there is a fragmentation of digital access, or rather, countries in the global south actually have fragmented societies. And actually developing comprehensive AI policies is crucial in managing these fast-paced changes that is imposed by AI technology. And the reason for this is because effective policies safeguard societies from potential harms, and actually potential harms such as job losses. As now we know, most companies are using AI technologies to even screen job seekers. And you can imagine for someone who perhaps is staying in the villages, who don't even have access to the internet, how the challenges or the negative consequences that some of these technologies might have in such communities. So basically, like I said, this was a comprehensive secondary review of existing literature on AI policies or governance, and particularly in the global south. We're not actually looking at all countries. We specifically focused on South Africa, India, Brazil, and Nigeria. And while in the global north, we're actually looking at the United States, the European Union countries, and also Canada, Japan, and South Korea. So before we dwell much into the policy, AI policies in the global north and global south, we need to understand the policy landscape in the global space. And some of the key AI policies in the global space are your OECD AI principles, which member countries have adopted, and these are specifically around ethical principles when it comes to AI technologies. And then we also have UNESCO recommendations as well, which also looks at AI ethics and also guiding the legal frameworks around AI. And also we have G7 and BRICS initiatives, which member countries have formed to enhance AI governance, and also a Council of European or Europe Convention, which it's more like a legally binding international convention on AI and human rights. And also of interest as well was a global partnership on AI, which was established to promote AI ethical adoption. And then we also have Trade and Technology Council, established to coordinate AU and US initiatives in AI. So this also, you know, tell us that there is a need for global south countries to have a similar trade and technology council that will coordinate AI relationship between us and the global north to avoid exploitation, of which has happened much if you look into health research. And also there's UN High-Level Advisory Board on AI, which was announced last year to just advance recommendation for international AI governance. And also there is partnership on AI established by tech companies. This was of interest to me to say, I mean, when it comes to AI policies, it's mostly driven by public institutions, but in the global space, you have tech companies which came together, civil society and academia, to develop guidance and inform policy on AI. And lastly, the Frontier Model Forum, founded as well last year to establish good governance mechanisms for advanced AI systems. So here we just want to have a look at the policy approach from the global north, and then some of the policy gaps that also exist there. And the reason for us to look at the approach is to kind of like understand where we are in terms of AI policy, so that we can able to address some of the gaps that are existing. And if you look at the United States, their approach when it comes to AI policy is market driven. And then where innovation is highly prioritized, and then with minimal regulation to avoid, stifting growth. So, and one of the policy gaps that exists there, it's around regulation on data privacy and accountability, actually lags behind in the United States. And when it comes to European Union countries, so it's a more stringent policy approach, where it's regulatory first approach. And some of, wherein they even have an Artificial Intelligence Act, wherein they even classify, some of these AI technologies as low risk and high risk, and putting more stringent measures on high risk technologies. And some of the policy gaps that exist is fragmented market actually hinders global competitiveness. And then when you look at Canada, their AI policies approach is actually on research ethic, and then also considerations of human rights. And one of the key policy gaps there, it's lower commercial application and global competition. And Japan actually has a mix of voluntary AI governance and non-binding guidelines, with emphasis on industrial strategies and focusing on robotics and smart cities, and also healthcare. The policy gaps that we found is that they lack comprehensive AI-specific legislation, and they instead rely on existing laws and regulations. And lastly, the country which was part of our sample was South Korea. So their approach is a balance between promoting innovation and actually addressing ethical concern. And part of the policy gaps is there's a lack of talent development in actually specialized area. You will see now as we are moving to the global south that skills development is particularly a barrier when you have an overview of countries in the global south. So in the global south, we looked at India and found that India's approach is, when it comes to AI policy is AI for social good, targeting sectors like the first speaker was looking at, your agriculture, healthcare, like the second speaker was looking at, education, and smart cities. So the policy gap that was analyzed was digital infrastructure, and ensuring data privacy standards, especially in rural areas, was actually the main gap when we look to India's policy approach. And a country of interest, our country, South Africa, so our approach is we want to use AI as to address socio-economic challenges, particularly including unemployment and inequality. And some of the policy gaps that were found is that there's limited digital infrastructure. Like I said, rural communities in South Africa, we know they don't normally have access to the internet. There's also network challenges and the likes. So the part of the gap here is in South Africa is lack of policies that actually addresses digital infrastructure, and also we lack policies that actually addresses the digital divide. To say yes, because even the AI framework that was recently published does talk on digital infrastructure, but the question is, how are we going to do that? How are we going to, ensure that societies and communities are not left behind? And then another country was Brazil, and their policy approach centers on innovation, on education, as well as ethical AI, particularly in sectors like your agriculture as well. And then part of the policy gaps is there is a disconnect between policy design and implementation due to fragmented infrastructure and political instability. And then Kenya and Nigeria can clump them together because they normally have they actually have a similar approach, which is to promote innovation and addressing ethical concerns. And their policy gap is also infrastructure and talent development. So we can see that the existing AI gaps or policy gaps in the Global South is actually the lack of infrastructure and also talent shortages. And also the second speaker was also talking about data availability and governance. It's a major gap in the Global South, and also regulatory lag and also dependence on external players. So we see that AI actually has a role to play in advancing international decade of science for sustainable development. And part of that is to ensure AI governance can ensure that whatever AI technology that's adopted and implemented actually drives the country towards attaining the SDG goals. And also collaboration, and also looking at addressing the digital divide. So what's our take-home message is that, yes, AI policies need, going forward, to answer the how, part when it comes to digital infrastructure and talent development, as to how the country can achieve this. So future research can actually look at this, and as people are doing research on this, will be actually achieving SDG Goal 9. And also addressing the digital divide, to say perhaps private companies, when they implement or adopt their AI technologies, they should partner with societies which lacks access to digital infrastructure, and do their pilot implementation studies there in order to improve the digital divide. And also we learned that AI policy should prioritize the local context, because if you check some of the gaps in Global South is now predominantly the digital infrastructure, and as well as the digital divide. So it would be or it is important rather for future research to actually focus on answering the how the digital infrastructure can be applied in order to address the digital divide in the global south. Thank you.
Thank you, T. Makamu, for your presentation. Do we have a question for Makamu?
Thank you very much, sir. This is such an important study that you're conducting right there, especially from the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, functioning in the policy environment. Yes. So it is important. Just on last week, I think it was Wednesday, we had an inter-academy panel meeting where one of the outcomes was that we should actually see what policies are where and what are they covering. So I think that's a great step, you know, in sort of addressing that particular concern. And I'm just wondering, you know, as of also working in the policy environment, maybe we should touch base. We actually have an MOU with the HSRC, just to see, because I can see, you know, although you're comparing countries with each other, I think you must look at regions as well, like SADC or African Union or NEPAD or whatever. They're doing an amazing job actually there. Fast tracking, you know, very fastly in this policy environment, etc. So just to invite you to please reach out to ASIF and we can see what is it, because I think this is quite critical. This is from a policy environment. So thank you very much for your initiative and your braveness to tackle that, because it's a lot of desktop research and scratching and hope you get something. And Madam Chair, if I might do some reverse technology, I just want to turn behind and I'm not sure who asked the question about ethics of the previous speaker. It is such an important question that, because you are dealing with health data, and how do you secure sort of the privacy of those incumbents? Because I think your ultimate goal is that it rolls out to hospitals or whatever for early detection of medicine, etc. And then how do you target? Maybe you've got to think about it. So if you have 200 participants and 50 of them is not susceptible to the medication, then how do you identify them? Because now you have to link back to that person. So just think about it, because I think that's the thing of AI, is in the space that you're starting to invade, and it can sort of, ethics is very important there. So please reach out. Thank you, sir.
No problem, I'll do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Okay.
Or maybe I can ask myself and answer myself. No, but there's a question.
And,
thank you so much, brother, for a nice presentation.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask something, or maybe if you haven't looked into it, maybe take it as also another dimension of the study. I'm also a new starter in AI. I'm still learning.
Yes.
So I've just learned that in AI there is supervised and unsupervised AI.
Technologies, yes.
Yes. So my question to you would be, how do policies differ on supervised versus unsupervised AI? Because I think there should be a major difference between the two in terms of policy setup.
No, you're actually right. There should be a difference, like what she rightfully said. So South Africa, we have a fragmented policy approach when it comes to AI. You find this document, the decadal plan will be touching on AI. You find this other policy is also touching on AI. So we actually do not have a comprehensive policy that would, like for example, unsupervised and supervised. But it goes back to what she said, to say initially, any policy, whether supervised or unsupervised technology, it should embed ethic principles. It should not harm the environment in which people are staying in. It should not actually, job losses. We should try as much as we can to save jobs if it's robotics or automated technologies. So I think that's one of the challenges. But regardless of it, we should, like, ethics, AI or ethics principles should be of key, either to the environment or to the people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I have a question. Okay, yeah, the last one because of time.
Thank you so much for the input and the valuable knowledge. I would like to ask, perhaps maybe I could also try to tackle this sort of policies. How did you go about in terms of your comparison study? Because I understand that there was no any user involvement. It was just mostly about literature. How did you conduct that for you to be able to get those comparison studies? Thank you.
Thanks. I think, like she said, it's a lot of reading. So I had actually, you sometimes decide last minute to say, let me not so like there are even numbers of AI policies that I can give you. Like for instance, I'll tell you where the sources and stuff. For instance, the Global North has over like 500 policy initiatives. And if you look in Africa, less than 100, because in Africa, it's few countries who actually have any policy, AI policy initiative. So, but the key source is the OECD. Hence, I limited my sample to these countries which are members of OECD, because OECD is credible data. So they do have like a lot of sites, like you can get AI reports for each country and their policy initiatives. So I went for OECD and I also tried to, do some literature research on what people are saying in terms of AI policies, what articles are out there. But the main source of information that I'm using, so I actually show the numbers to say, because I know South Africa has like 3 policy initiatives so far according to the OECD. So the United States has about 26 policy initiatives according to the OECD. So the sources like OECD, if you want to really get credible data in terms of what policies and actually reading the policies, I know Australia has a nice ethical principles framework. So you have countries which actually have like AI principle frameworks or ethical framework that you can actually read and understand how they are going about it. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makamu, for your presentation. Let us all give him a round of applause. I would like to call P or CSC.
Sorry, I have the best of eyes here, so I have to, Yeah, I think it's better for me. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. This work is a subset of my postdoctoral research at the university, and the research is trying to find out, along the lines of my brother, my colleague who just spoke about AI, we feel, of course, myself and my host, that the teacher education curriculum may not be up to date as it should be regarding the fourth industrial revolution demands. So it is upon that, criticism that we think there should be a need to revive the curriculum, especially regarding the teacher education curriculum. So we try to carry out a perception study to see what the pre-service teachers are feeling or what they think about the curriculum to which they are exposed to. So as I said earlier, in higher education, especially concerning the area that concerns the mother of all education on training, which is the teacher education, we believe that there are concerns regarding the responsiveness of the curriculum along the new age, which is the age of the 4 hours. Then we also know that if this is not tackled now, there will be difficulty in the future for these teachers to be able to meet the demands of the future, since we know the future now, as it is now, is currently a technology-driven world. The rationale pushing us for this study is the dissatisfaction from the literature, especially in the South African space, that the curriculum, as used to train the teachers in this space, may, even in Africa, I think, may need further re-evaluation or redesign. So this led us into, trying to go into the literature to see how the contents of the teacher education curriculum, as it is here in the university, is actually promoting the necessary or the requisite skills and attitudes within the profession. As such, we went to tackle, we did not go much into delving into the 21st century skills as a whole, because there are many of them. We only consigned our inquiry into the learning skills as the 21st century skills measures. So we had to, consider this major one, which is the red one, the learning skills, where we try to assess the perception of the teachers regarding their critical thinking skills, their creative thinking skills, their collaboration and communication skills. Because I thought that even the other ones may actually fall in line with the first, learning skills. So from this, as I said earlier, the gap was actually found in literature, that many graduate after graduation, especially regarding the schools where we go for teaching practicum assessment. Teachers will ask us that they are worried about the teachers that come under them for practicum. And we became worried. That why is this so? Even in my country where I come from, we are also worried that teachers are losing the traditional teaching, vigor. And not only that, we're not talking about the conventional teaching vigor now. We talk about now the vigor of the future. I am writing a book now on the curriculum for the future. I notice if this is not rectified, there will be problem for the unborn children. So it is upon this basis that this study now began to see how we can begin to, through the perception of these pre-service teachers under the tutelage of, it can be improved. The theories, because this is a social science study under the Faculty of Education, we have to theoretically, design the study under these theories, the Pitridge self-regulated learning theory, the TPAC theory of Mishra 26, and the theory of planned behavior. The research objectives is hereby highlighted. We try to examine the perception of pre-service teachers on the curriculum to which they are exposed, as I said, along the lines of the 21st century. And by extension, we also find from them what are the challenges they think is affecting the attainment of this case, so to say. So three research questions were raised in the study, and it has been itemized in the slide. In this study, we adopted the positivist paradigm. The research design was a descriptive survey type of the non-experimental design. And the population was only pre-service teachers at NMU here in the university. The sampling technique we used was the purposive and the simple random sampling. And at the end, we gathered 401 samples. The instrument we used was the pre-service teachers perceived 21st century skills development questionnaire. And this instrument was quantitative, and it was validated via the Cronbach alpha and the ordinal alpha validation reliability coefficient. The data was collected by the help of Ms. Roche, one of the administrators in the faculty, who helped us to host a survey form, and it lasted for 2 months for us to get enough response. The data analysis was done by Hayes process in SPSS, version 26. And we wanted to use the ordinary SPSS, but we noticed it cannot handle especially the categorical data and the ordinal data. A reason we now came about using the Hayes macro version. So we used the descriptive statistics mainly, which were frequency counts and percentages. We also used medians and graph. The results of the study show that teacher education curriculum that is used here in NMU inculcates the 21st century skills in the pre-service teachers as perceived by them. They also claim that the collaborative skills, critical skills, creative skills, and communication skills were the most prevalent of these 21st century skills as the curriculum imparts on them. However, most of these skills were the collaborative and the communication skills. When asked what are the challenges that hampers them from developing this skill, they claim that there is, overwork. Students will always say that. I also said that when I was at the university, that there is too much of workload, academic workload they call it. There is lack of digital competency and literacy on their part, and also there is inadequate assessment of ICT-related skills. The results are hereby more presented in frequency counts and percentages. We also did a presentation regarding the levels of the skills. So the study concludes thus that the perceptions of pre-service teachers regarding the curriculum as used to teach them at this university was positive. We also learned from the study and conclude thus that the prevalent 21st century skills among the pre-service teachers in this university are the collaborative and the communicative skills, followed by the critical skills and creativity skills, which are very or somewhat low. The pre-service teachers also claim that the workload given to them, academic workload, along with the lines of they are lacking the digital competencies and digital literacies as it is now in vogue, as well as for what they call inadequate assessment along the lines of ICT-related skills or technology-related skills, where the challenge they are having in becoming, tech savvy. The study therefore recommends the following: that the teacher education curriculum here, or if not here alone, this faculty of education here in this university, or elsewhere that have similar context, we believe that there should be need to reassess the 21st century skills acquisition or development among, as embedded in the curriculum of teacher education. Especially, attention should be given to the area of creativity and critical thinking skills. We also recommend that professional development programs be organized for lecturers who are the tutors or the implementer of the curriculum to learn or know more about these skills and how to impart it on pre-service teachers. Then we also recommend that assessment procedures be redesigned or reevaluated to advance the development of 21st century skills among our pre-service teachers. And finally, we recommend that the ICT 21st century training models be brought into the curriculum, along with establishing centers where students can go and be taught, be trained on the ICT 21st century skills as required. And we provided references that guided the work, some of them, of course, and I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you so much, Osesi, for your presentation. Do we have questions for Osesi?
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Comments? Okay. You're talking about 21st century. Are you talking about maybe enforcing this learning into the science centers, or is it only for universities?
Science centers, you mean?
Centers whereby there are learners, because you're talking about teachers.
Yeah.
So are you going to also look into the centers whereby learners will come and learn about ICT?
Yeah, this is the first phase of the study, where we have now seen what happens along the lines of pre-service teachers. We are now going to extend the study into the school system, into the normal school system, and see how this knowledge, how it's now being practiced by practicing teachers in the schools, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much.
We think it will now extend. But then, the curriculum that only talk about teaching is this curriculum. The other ones in the other faculties does not really talk about, that does not train learners into the teaching field.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the work is only on the teaching curriculum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Mine is not a question, it is a comment. Since you are referring to ICT skills being used and, in education system, I just wanted to bring it to attention that just last week I was running a trial at DUT where we are trying to use virtual labs. We are using the visual technology. I'm not sure if any one of us here have been through to these amusement places where you put the virtual headset. Yes. So we are running trials of that technology where we use virtual system to sort of take learners through electrical machines which might have been dangerous if you were to interact with them physically. But through using virtual technology, they can see high voltage machines, transformers, and all of those things. So it is a trial that is being run where we use ICT skills in teaching learners. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have another question? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Osesi. Let us clap hands for him, please. Our next speaker is S. Muchaku. Do we have S. Muchaku? Okay. If S. Muchaku is not here, we'll call P. Mohuale.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for time. To conduct literature. I'm sure that you have heard a lot of speakers that spoke about artificial intelligence. In terms of explorations, it's not about whereby I did quantitative or qualitative, also mostly about exploration of my. And the roadmap that I'm going to take you through is about introduction and problem, aims, and also research strategy that I've used to conduct this study. So basically, this study in terms of conducting using artificial intelligence. So one could try to understand literature review, what is in terms of scholarly, as we do contact literature for several purposes, even within the field work or even within other specialty, there is a purpose of conducting literature review. So literature review in most cases, it's all about making sure that you conduct study that has been already published or isn't available there, and then you analyze it based on what you're trying to tackle. So we conduct literature in different aspects, and in education, we conduct literature in most cases, maybe to build education system relevant, and maybe perhaps to strengthen our education systems, and also for the advance in terms of technology as technology is advancing, and also to withstand the changes that are for disruption, perhaps maybe with regards to the pandemic. And also this is mostly that is impacting with the social development goal number 4, which is mostly to ensure inclusive and equitability in terms of quality education. So scholars in most cases in literature hundreds of times, or they take so much time in terms of trying to find good or trying to find important elements when they are conducting their studies. And in most cases, this process takes a crucial component for one to conduct these steps. And this is mostly tedious, and also it can be unbiasedness, whereby one could find themselves using what we call unbalanced data. So with regards to that, we have seen that there's quite a number of changes that in most cases we have seen the terms or within the niche area such as artificial intelligence that takes over, whereby mostly about who resemble human minds, and also they are good in terms of solving advanced algorithms that can provide us with remarkable outcomes, and also they can be able to provide us with variety of reasons. Because in AI, in education, AI can provide quite a number of reasons. We can use AI so that we can conduct our literature. We can also use AI so that we can obviously be able to remedial this tedious process of consuming, whereby one could manually go and look at databases or researchers out there. And also AI's technologies can be used to carry out quite a number of phases, whereby it can be used to find problem, can be used to search literature, can also be used for inclusion or exclusion criteria. So the problem that this study seeks to address is that in most cases, conducting literature review, using artificial intelligence has a lot of a plethora of softwares that are available out there, and in most cases, those AI technologies, they're best for individual research project, and they're also best for individual project or individual research studies. So the concern that exists with this problem is that there are ethical issues and also the quality consequences of employing this AI when you're conducting your literature. I'm sure that the first previous speakers have stated about their data sets that they've used in terms of analyzing their data, and you can tell that they've used AI, but then there was ethical issues that were involved in terms of their data, whereby we see that there were biasness because they only use a limited number of studies. So in that cases, we would say that AI, we need to look at it in terms of how we use AI when we're conducting our studies. So the aim of this study is mostly to explore the AI technologies and also focus on the ethical concern, and by looking at the challenges and the barriers, and also the impact in terms of the ethical consideration, and also importantly to make recommendations for the policymaker. So the research method that has been implied in this study review, as I've stated, that this was not a qualitative or quantitative study, but mostly an exploratory study. So we've used what we call literature review study, and literature review study, it has different approaches. One could either conduct what we call interactive or narrative, or maybe systematic literature review, or however, meta-analysis, or what we call interactive reviews. So with this study, we conducted what we call systematic literature review, and systematic literature review we conducted because of it has a purpose of collecting, identifying rigorous research paper, and also it assists us in terms of getting what we call current literature, and it has the ability for upcoming priorities. So with this literature, systematic literature, we conduct it for a one could conduct it in a sense that they could maybe try to find new research directions, or maybe for foundation of developing a theory, or maybe perhaps you want to improve your policy, or you want to look at guidelines for academics. So there are a number of papers that one could conduct systematic literature review. And with this study, we are conducting it so that we could perhaps maybe even give a guidelines to those policymakers. And the research study took over, like I said, it took over systematic literature review. So when you conduct a systematic literature review, there's methods that are available out there. But with this study, we've used what we call a PRISMA, which is a systematic, it's a preferred reporting items for systematic literature review and meta-analysis. So this method is mostly good in terms of when you are critically wanting to select and identify eligible publication or eligible literature out there. So with Prisma analysis, one would have to follow a certain flow for you to identify the relevant literature there. So we have followed what we call Prisma, and in terms of Prisma, we used our keyword to search for a specific database, because with Prisma, it starts with, it's critical for you to be able to state how you have find your data. You start by looking at a specific databases. You can even make use of comparative or even number of databases. So with this study, we've used IEEE to conduct this, and then we've used keywords such as systematic literature review, tools, and also artificial intelligence. And then from the Journal of IEEE, we got about 126 studies that we found that were eligible for us to carry with this study. However, we did not include all the studies because Prisma would guide us to screen, and we went and screened, and we excluded conference paper mostly because conference paper, they are not, in most cases, they are inclined as papers that are not of high quality. So those were excluded. And we also excluded books because of their higher quality as compared to journals. So we only took journal papers. We also excluded irrelevant ones. Irrelevant ones could be those ones that were duplicate or maybe not even cited, because citation is also important in terms of understanding how a paper actually was observed by other researchers. So we went down in terms of inclusion and exclusion criteria, and from the ones that we have selected, three most crucial one, which I think they were applicable now for this study. And then in our findings, we have found that if one were to conduct literature review using artificial intelligence, there are a biasness that comes with using artificial intelligence. Even though we know that it's here, and it has changed the way in which we used to conduct literature review, and we're no longer using the traditional method whereby one has to go step by step in terms of reading every paper or any publication. So you can use you can use AI to do that for you. However, tools that most cases that one could use in terms of conducting literature reviews could be the likes of native, could be the likes of native base, and also could be likes of as reviews. They all categorize it differently. Some they are used for screening journals, some they are used for also allocating a problem statement. Some they can also be used to writing your own findings or even writing your whole internal paper. But however, there are biasness that were identified. And some of those biasness has to do with what we call exclusion of citation as well. And some of those have to do with transparency in terms of the black box. And another one, it has to do with selection of those non-predictable literature. So using AI, when you're conducting your literature review, one has to be able to identify, because in most cases, some of this AI do not have what we call open source softwares, whereby if you're coming from a development point of view, you could be able to tell the kind of data set that we use when you are exploring your literature. So using AI when you are conducting literature, you must be able to tell that unfortunately you will be having to deal with biasness or ethical consideration, because AIs use data set, and when they're using data set, there are some of the models that use specific data set. So you've got to be able to look at those ones so that you should be able to know which one are relevant for your study. So generally, in terms of recommendations and in terms of conclusion, would say whenever you're using AI to conduct your literature review, one has to be able to look at the transparency of those AI models. So the best method to go about it is to select those open source application, so that you should be able to look at the transparency that comes with those AI. And again, we still encourage that human interface or human expertise is still very much needed. As much as we said, AI can conduct literature review so that your times that you spend in terms of browsing through your literature could be lesser. But unfortunately, you still, as a human being, still need to go and critically look at your data. And then we also recommend that developers of AI should in hand with education institutions so that they can tailor-make what we call solutions that fit for a specific field. Unlike generally using any type of AI, I'm sure that we have used other tools of AI, maybe ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is not contextualized to any field. Anybody from any different field can use it. So we are advising that perhaps maybe developers should work with institutions so that they can tailor-make their AI models to fit within the sector that they are developing for. And again, we should also be aware of the biasness that comes with using AI, which is also has to be with the transparency and accountabilities, and again, algorithms for decision making. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Do we have a question?
Thank you very much. Just a reminder to all researchers in this room, if you use AI in any of your methods or your analysis, etc., please state that also in your research. It is very important to actually indicate that you have used AI in all these processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other question or comment? If we do not have further questions, I'd like to, there's a hand. Where? Oh, I didn't see.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So I just want to understand in terms of the role of ethics committees, yes. Like she has rightfully said, I mean, that you need to acknowledge to say, and it's good that your presentation is on education. Like, what's your comment around the role of research ethic committees and some of these AI tools?
Well, my advice or my recommendation in terms of the AI ethics for the committee is that whenever you tailor-made a policy or even a guidelines for institutions, one should look at the culture of the institutions. One should look at the implications of using that AI tools, and also one should look at there are a lot of AI tools that are out there. So there should be a specific one that at least an institution should allow students to use, because either way, whether we allow them or we not, they are still going to use it. But the question is, how are they going to use it and which one they can use it? So we must develop a culture whereby we do advise the student to use AI, but in an applicable manner, whereby they can also be given which one they should use, because there's a lot of them out there that students use. And also, I would say for professional in terms of teaching and learning, or in terms of lectures, they should also get what we call training, because if you're not coming from a development point of view, I'm a developer, so I know whenever I'm saying something about data set, what is it that I'm referring to? So somebody else who does not know algorithms or data set, they won't even know if you were to choose an AI models, what is it that you must look for? So I would say that even lecturers must be trained in terms of understanding the implication of just using any AI models. So there must be specific one that get to be chosen, and chosen looking at the data set and the machine learning that has been embedded on that AI models. Thank you.
Any other question? Okay. Without wasting time, let us all clap hands for our speaker. I would like to call the last speaker of the day, Zed Ngula.
Hello. Okay, hi guys. last one for the day. I'll try to be brief and concise. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Artificial Intelligence, a New Global System, a Genocidal Project, or the Revival of the Dokoloshe Culture. This, I must say, I'm a social scientist. Just a disclaimer before I go up on my presentation. Okay, so, okay, perfect. Okay, so the first thing I want to open with is that this is a paper that's currently in production, and I'll appreciate any comments you guys will have at the end of it, because I'm currently dealing with reviewer 2, and it's difficult. All right. So an inclusive approach to AI development. Like I said, I took a social scientist approach to this paper in a sense of, if you heard most of the speakers were talking about, especially the first ones, they talked about, like, there's always two sides to a coin, most of which how AI development and how they've used AI has benefited our societies. So my aim with this presentation, rather, is to look at the other side of the coin, more on the social impact of AI deployment and development. Okay, so the first, I'm basically going to do a very high-level presentation of the main core arguments of the paper. The first thing is that, just trying to, this mouse is very stubborn. Yeah. Can I please get IT support? I'm struggling to. No, I'm trying to check something on the slide. Hi, is it possible to scroll down here? So I'm trying to. Can you see it? Okay, so the first theoretical orientation that we used in the paper was trying to look at AI development by looking through at it with inclusive innovation. And so by inclusive innovation, we use the definition used by Foster and Rees, which is developing and implementing innovations that aim to benefit marginalized communities. And this meant about in any AI development, it had to incorporate communities And it should not just segregate certain communities, but rather bring about a community of knowledge creation. So the other point on inclusivity was that developing AI solutions had to have local needs to it. It shouldn't be just about making things faster, like rapid adaptation of things, but it should be about, is this a local need for a specific community? Okay. So one of the first key arguments that we argue in the paper is questioning if AI is a new global system. And before we talk about global systems, it's always important to look at the history of the different types of systems that we've had before. And we talk about an example of feudalism, where we know that feudalism meant about sort of like a de-skilling of labor, because it focused on a particular type of feudal laws, and then you had your quote-unquote working class, where you saw that a particular person was only skilled in one type of task. Like, let's say you're building a car, that person would only be able to upskill in building wiper blades and not fitting the wheels. And then because of technological advancement, we then saw that capitalism came. Do you want to come in? Okay. Okay. So with that shift from feudalism to capitalism, we posed the question of, is AI then a new type of global system? With that, we meant about the fact that we see AI as being very transformative in the strategies and the tools that we use. But the most important thing is that we're seeing a rapid use of adaptation and automation. And the biggest argument that we saw when we were looking at the literature was that this meant a redefinition of labor. And by labor, we mean the task, not really the task, but rather if someone has the ability to work, that's human labor. Using that ability to work and then sustain yourself and have a livelihood, that's your human labor. And then now with the arrival of AI and automation, we're seeing that there's this new global system of automation and trying to take away human labor, and that in a way leads us to think about AI becoming this genocidal project. And by genocidal project, we mean that because AI takes a lot of the human labor away from a lot of tasks, does that mean then it's depriving people of their livelihoods, thus leading to economic disenfranchisement, more unemployment, which could lead to societal unrest, like a lot of negative repercussions for the society as a whole. And I think a case study of South Africa, we know that a lot of the quote-unquote working class work in sectors like the fast food and retail and your blue-collar sectors, which is your construction and agriculture. And currently, we see most of AI development and deployment first being issued in those sectors. And that, in a way, is trying to de-skill those people if they do not adapt to the current AI era, right? It's causing about unemployment in those sectors specifically. And in that sense, it's perpetuating a sort of genocidal project because it's leaving a certain group of people marginalized and also unemployed. And so that's just one coin of AI deployment and development. But the most important thing I want to make with this slide is that it impacts a lot of the less advantaged communities, and thereby it sort of widens the gap of social inequalities, because people who are from, like we've heard with the other speakers, the global north, they have much established policies and regulators even in place to sort of even upskill communities from the global north, whereas in the global south, you get communities where, I will get to the point where we mean by the Tokolosho culture, you get communities that the digital divide is so imminent, like it's so present that if you are then to just have a KFC and that big screen there, they won't even know how to use that thing. or they will lose a lot of jobs. So you can't be putting such machines in certain locations, because it takes away a lot of not only unemployment opportunities, but then it sort of widens the economic divide in communities. So before I get to the Tokolosa culture, in the paper, we also talk about the loss of Ubuntu in AI development. Because AI is brought about machine learning, there's a sense of humanness that gets sort of lost. We often talk about AI being developed in Silicon Valley, which is not even in South Africa. But what we argue with this part of the paper is that in understanding Ubuntu as a core value philosophy, I don't want to say philosophy, it sounds very much in the air, but a core humanistic, intrinsic value, yeah. It's very important for someone who's South African to have that humanness, even if you go to the shop. Whereas with AI, you're finding that more and more things are becoming automated. It's taking away the humanness, that interconnectedness that people have. And if you look at it again from a coin side perspective, it does conflict with the fact that AI advancements means that there's less of the human being needed, right? It means that there's a reduction of human relationships due to automation. And in a way, this contributes to the challenges of dignity, because another thing about Ubuntu is that it's about your human dignity. Once you are able to survive and work hard for your family, you have a sense of self-worth that you're able to contribute, because it goes back to I am because we are, right? And with AI advancement, it means that you now losing your job, say you are a construction worker, you losing your job, you are unable to provide for your family. You're gonna go home and feel very like your self-worth takes a huge drop in that. So it's just one of the conflicts people have with AI advancements. And it then brings me to the third point here about the ethical implication that there's this lack, or rather a gap, that policymakers should account for when designing the AI Act that they're currently busy with, that the need for AI development in South Africa specifically, it needs to align with our Ubuntu principles and the other core value systems that we have, because this is not the only one. So the ethnographic example to which we're actually showing in our paper is, it also speaks to the divide of how people culturally understand AI. We have the revival of the Tokolosa culture, where the Tokolosa is an African folklore. Most people know it as this mythical creature that is seen as an entity that can do harm and also create fortune. And this parallels with AI in the sense of AI can be a very great tool, like we've heard from the other speakers. In the same breath, it's also it can cause unpredictable impacts on society, like I've also mentioned about the job losses and all of that. So when we were writing this paper, we read a lot on how people understand AI, and this discourse of this pulling this thread of sort of like trying to understand AI and then putting an African folklore to it. This was like a small community trying to understand what AI was, and to them they saw it as similar to the Tokolosa. They didn't understand where it came from. They didn't understand what it was doing. They saw that it was doing harm and fortune, bringing fortune at the same time. And from this, we realized that there's a need for cultural significance to be attached to AI development. And this meant about integrating cultural understanding in AI development. And then one of the policy recommendations that we spoke about was that how, firstly, investing in training, because you need to equip the workforce with AI skills, and also trying to sort of bridge the divide of the digital divide. But I think what I want to just emphasize on this slide is to foster community engagement. Like that need to involve local communities in AI policy making is so important. We realized that as we were writing this is that there's that need for the citizen's voice in the AI framework, because at the time we wrote this around June, and the framework only came out a few weeks ago, right? And we were reading it, and yes, it's one of the strategic pillars that they will try to attempt to like speak to, but it's not pronounced. Like my colleague mentioned, that you can't really tell how they're going to implement that strategic pillar in the framework. Okay, I see I'm almost out of time. All right, so this second last slide that I wanted to just sort of wrap everything in was that, firstly, I opened up and I spoke about inclusive education. So when we include inclusive, not education, why am I saying education? Inclusive innovation. When we incorporate inclusive innovation, which means bringing about innovation that not only is created by all communities, but innovation that will benefit all communities, and also bringing the core intrinsic values like Ubuntu into AI development, and also making sure that we don't see AI as this new genocidal project. If we can focus on those three things, these are the sort of like the three sort of benefits we might get from having an AI development or like deployment in South Africa that can be inclusive to all people. Like for an example, empowering the African youth, and this I included there contributing to South Africa, to South Africans becoming a leader in AI innovation. And that's actually one of the pillars they mentioned in the policy framework. But we can only do that if we leverage AI to foster innovation and leadership, and also preparing the next generation for 21st century challenges. And my concluding thoughts on my presentation is that I think I've mentioned how AI has dual potential, both in not just being a global system, but also it has a huge risk on our societal values. And we need to ethically sit more and think more about how we can critically weave in different voices in our AI policy framework and AIX. And this goes back to the call to policymakers and to whoever sits in these big rooms to create these policies, to get out of their silos. And I started my conversation to say that I'm a social scientist. And I said that because being a social scientist, it broadens your mind to see beyond your silo, but rather to make sure to dabble and tap into many different disciplines. And if policymakers do not start thinking like that, AI will only benefit a few people. Like investing in human-centered AI development, it needs to align with our values. It needs to align with our needs as a community. And not until we do that, I don't like all of the things that we've spoken about can just sit and end in this room. It's not going to be something worthy of action or something that everyone can use everywhere, because we don't want to end up having a South Africa that AI is only done in universities. It's only stuff we see published about, but not an actual tool that can be used everywhere. Oh, final thoughts. The future of AI in Africa depends on collective efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Do we have a question?
Thanks very much for your presentation. But in reality, AI is here to stay, and whether you like it or not. There was a fourth IR industrial revolution, and they are still pushing it right now. If AI, some of the costs will be redundant because of AI. Yes, and then the policymakers, they highly depend on the market. Business people are the one who determine, in terms of profit, everything. So whether you can discourage AI, at the end of the day, you won't win the battle. Thanks very much.
Thank you. It's just a comment so that you are also not be lost in between finding your study. Because this AI, if you were to take a time and try to look at the history of where it comes from, AI has been there for a long time. It has been there. It's just that in most cases, maybe perhaps in the education space, it has not been extensively used. Maybe because of we don't have the capabilities, the expertise and all that, but AI has been there. So your study perhaps, you could also, because I tried to understand the direction. Are you taking a direction of trying to I don't know, explore what is AI or explore, because there's a lot of things that are involved with AI technologies. When you say AI, are you implying to what? Technologies, are you implying to what aspect? So you are being very general when you speak about AI. Maybe if you could also try to narrow it down in a sense of maybe AI in terms of education or AI in terms of what sectors per se. Because now, when you are just generalizing, it's still going to come back to say, what are you saying about? Because AI has been there for so many years. I'm sure you've been using Google. Google has data set. We've been using it. I've been using Google for, I don't know for how many years. So you need to be very careful right there when you're generalizing. Okay.
I'll take the last hand. Okay.
Okay, this is a very important discussion. I remember a few days back, I'm in the engineering department, so I can say like some of the blame, can put it here. Because we realized one thing, we have all these technologies that are happening, and then we never take them. In fact, like us, all the scientists will do all these researches, but we never take these researches to the community. Because I believe that like, if maybe we can take the researches that we are doing, everything that we presented here, presented it to the community, they're going to have a different perspective. Because every research that we are doing is either like in AI or anything, any technology that we are doing, it's either you're trying to solve a certain problem. That's the motivation of doing that project. Yeah. And then once they can see the motivation behind whatever that we are doing, or like we are designing as scientists. Yeah, I think like that's maybe like something that we can push, especially to the policymakers, that like, okay, at least the training and then this environment, like for example, this event, invite like those people from the local communities just to come and see the things that we're talking about, and then maybe have their input. How do they feel about it while we are doing it? And then just find like a few years back, we've been doing it, building it, and then later it's not applicable to them, or they don't know how to use it, but it's there. You understand? And then like, once it's there, like there's nothing that we can do to take it back. It's there. So the only thing that we can do is like, okay, while we're building it, prepare them, the community, to get there. That's my view in terms of the topic, actually. Yeah, but like the presentation is nice. It's something that we need to, as a community, like scientists, look into deeper into it. Thanks.
I think you are getting more of the comments. I mean, suggestions.
Do I need to say?
You can respond if you have
Thank
something
you.
to respond to.
Start with okay, so I'm not looking at a specific as a whole, in terms of, like I said, I'm looking at AI as a system, as in like feudalism, capitalism. Is AI the next system in terms of traditional labor, automation, what next? So I'm looking at it from that. I don't have an educational background from pegging off, so I can't speak to that. And to Ubuti there, I think maybe you got the wrong part of the conversation. I'm not saying AI should go away, but a call to policymakers, think about the citizens. And currently, remember, we're in the process of drawing up the National AI Act as a country. I'm saying with this paper, we need to have Ubuntu Act. We need to think of how we've seen other global systems change from one system to another. What is going to go on with AI? We're not saying AI must go away. You just said Google makes life easy for ourselves. You don't want those things to disappear, but rather, again, once we leave, what am I going to use? Am I going to go back to Queenstown and be able to use Google? What if there's no net? Like, we need to think outside of their silos and think of how AI, I've been saying,
You will all agree that this was an exciting session. I would like to thank all the speakers and the audience for making comments and suggestions to all the speakers. Thank you so much. We are done for this session, so I believe that it is a cocktail hour now, and there will be a book launch after that. Thank you.